Friends, hello everyone. I am glad to see you on my channel, and today we have a drawing lesson, and we will draw this kind of drapery. It was in front of your eyes for a few seconds in a large version. You can take a picture of it, make a screenshot of the screen, and then draw with me, looking at the big picture. In this video, I will voice not only what I do in the recording, but also at the time when I drew this work. I was voicing what I was doing. And now, a small piece will be with my explanations of what creases are, what hatching is, and how to hatch creases. Now I'm making a sketch of this drapery. And I draw in detail the folds that I see. It's okay if you make some crease wider or narrower somewhere. This is absolutely normal. So friends, well, let me explain what folds I drew. We only draw what is obvious, apparently. Right, there's this line, this line, this line. Here we have a good view, but there are some moments. For example, here is a shadow, but you can also draw a line, or you cannot draw it. That is, to show this line with hatching. For example, there's a shadow starting here somewhere. That is, there are no edges as such, there are no lines. The edges are quite blurred, they fade away smoothly enough. That's why I don't draw anything here. Here it would be possible to outline a little bit there, or it is possible not to outline it, because all of this has very smooth transitions, as it were, these transitions, iridescences of tone, so we will immediately show them with hatching. And you know, I'll tell you right away, I've already had a little bit of shading. Here you see the dirt. That's when we are engaged in drawing. It's best to take and put some piece of paper under your arm. You put it and enter it with your hand on the paper, and then your hand will not get dirty. But the hand is fine. The main thing is that you can wash your hand, but you can't wash your work. Let me remind you a little bit in general how we hatch, the types of hatching. So look, the main thing is to be a stroke. Not painting over like this, but a stroke should be visible. And the main rule of the stroke is that we should have it not like a log with such edges, but from nowhere it goes to nowhere, from nowhere to nowhere, from nowhere to nowhere. Do you see how thin my tips are here? And it starts with a thin tip and ends with a thin tip. That is, the maximum pressure of the pencil falls on the center of the stroke. I call it a hair under a microscope. Yes, it's like this thick hair, and then one, and it goes away. Here we should have such hatching. And if we are leading a stroke, then we start the next row of strokes from the middle of this stroke. That is, this is how we stroke. We start the next row from the middle of this row, yes, and in this way, we get a smooth canvas of shading. But there should be at least 2 overlays. That is, if we stroke like that, then the second overlay, well, let it be like this. Again, the row was shaded. The next row we have comes from the middle of the first row. They've been shod. The next row we have comes from the middle of the first, second row, and so on. Usually, of course, we stroke flat planes like this, a cube, a hexagon, the surface of a table, a textbook, and so on. In other words, it is necessary to remember that we stroke flat planes with a smooth stroke all the time. With drapery, everything is a little different. The drapery is not flat, that is, the stroke should not be even. That is, more precisely, it can be flat, but it can also be rounded. Let me show you other types of hatching. That is, it is possible So what directions can there be? In fact, the directions can be very different. You can stroke it from above like that, stroke it like that, maybe the direction is like that, and I don't know, like that. But by the way, I still don't recommend a lattice like this. Maybe a stroke like this. That is, the direction you decide for yourself which one. At least 2 shading, at most, there may be a lot of them. What should we do with our drapery? In general, it goes according to form all the time, and if you have watched previous videos, here, for example, is a cylinder. Well, it's clear. Everything is clear with the cube. We stroke it with a smooth stroke. If we have a cylinder, then an uneven plane already appears here, and, accordingly, we stroke with a semicircle. Here's how to understand, and we always stroke, of course, according to the shape of the stroke. Since our drapery seems to flow down, here it is hanging on 2 carnations, then it is absolutely obvious that I will be hatching 1 shading, this one is flat, and we will have it going from top to bottom, and accordingly, it will not be so smooth, and if the drapery goes like this, yes, roughly speaking, then, well, conditionally I shall. 1 shading will be like this. What will be the second shading? This is where everything is very interesting. Let's take a look, for example, at this part. I'll try to explain a little bit how we choose the second one about hatching. That is, here we found out we have such a stroke. We imagine that we took and cut it with scissors like this. This is where we took it, cut it up. She continues to hang on the nail. Yes, and what do we get there? Let me try to sketch. So, here it's still like this, here it is, and here we cut it from the bottom, as it were. So, well, it's probably going to go like this, then like this, then here we have it coming in, because there's such a thing here. Somehow there it bends, here again once, then again. We have a fold and a big fold, but here it turns out about somehow like this. In other words, we need to understand here what we have, what kind of cut there will be, imagine it. And then the second one about hatching. How do we do? We are looking at this line. If there is such a bend here, then I stroke according to the shape. In form, it means sticking to this direction. Here the bend is like this, so I'm going to stroke a semicircle like this. Here again, the bend goes in this direction. My semicircle is changing, that is, you know, right. Then I stroke a semicircle in this direction. Then I stroke a semicircle in this direction. Then I stroke a semicircle in this direction, depending on what kind of cut I have. Here I stroke like this. Thus, if we stick to this second hatching, that is, it repeats the shape of the fold. Thus, we will be able to reveal more volume and show more. In other words, it is an additional tool that allows us to show the curves of fabrics and how they change. How the fold changes, how it is, where it floats away, and so on. And accordingly, the second shading will be in this direction. Well, let's get started. Well, here's the main thing I wanted to say about the shading of the drapery. It was in the previous piece, where I explained about the cuts. You know, it's not always necessary to do this, absolutely not always. If you look at how I'm hatching now, then I still have a top-down hatching predominant, because my work is small, and it still actively falls down from top to bottom, and such small folds are obtained there. Right now I'm slanting a stroke. This is also quite acceptable, but now I'm trying to stroke the shape. I took such a typical standard drapery. Usually this is how they hang it on 1 or 2 carnations, as you see here, and give it to students to dry. That is, it is such a kind of educational drapery, so to speak, and in general, it is quite simple, and I did not fully manage to reveal and show in this lesson all that variety of folds that could be shaded according to the principle that I explained a little earlier. I stroke the shape. Although here I have, yes, there is vertical hatching, and at the same time, there is horizontal hatching, but not so much. That's why I called this lesson, How to Learn How to Stroke Drapery, Part 1. Because I really wanted to take off Part 2 and take a more complex drapery, when, for example, it hangs from something from top to bottom, and at the same time lies on the table, and there are a lot of large folds and folds. You see, there are a lot of folds, and they are mixed in there. That is a complex one. Take a complex work really from the point of view of draperies, and draw it for you, thereby demonstrating how complex folds are drawn after all, because you can learn to draw them. Yes, I understand, it's always stressful when you are finishing the drapery for the first time. And I can also tell from my students when I put it on for the first time, so they drew plaster figures, and at some point, we have a still life of plaster objects with drapery. This is already about the fourth or fifth work after the student has come, and everyone grabs his head and says, "Oh no, how are we going to draw this drapery?" But of course the first time I put a little crease. It's quite simple, and you know there's not much to be afraid of. Everyone draws this drapery beautifully, but we will draw in the second work. I'll choose. I don't think it will be just a drape. There may be some minimal fruit there. There may be one fruit or one object, and there will be a complex drapery. Maybe I'll even take this job myself. And you know, now I have decided to show the fabric on which our main drapery hangs. This secondary fabric, pay attention. I stroke it according to the shape. That is, right now, I have a stroke going from top to bottom. Here, I have again repeated hatching in the form of draperies, which I am hatching. That is, I sort of circle it, but I don't focus on it. I circled about a centimeter, nullified it, and then I choose. For example, diagonally, I stroke. You see, we are hatching according to the shape of the object. I decided to shade the back drapery after all, because the volume of the object that we draw depends not only on how we shaded this particular object, but it is also very important how we shaded the background around it, how we shaded the shadows from it. That is, in general, that's all that happens inside. This time, I don't have Kakener pencils. I took the artist's whist pencils, decided to test them. In principle, they are not bad pencils, but I do not know if I will draw with them or not. Still, I feel a small difference from the Kakener pencils. The main difference is what? Well, the hardness and softness do not always match. That is, for example, in 2B, he gives one tone in Kakener, and in the artist's whist, he is much darker. And here's a little confusion, it's unusual. Here, I had a Goshnik paper and a Kohinoor white eraser with an elephant. Note that I'm hatching everything at the same time. I drew the work first, then I opened a small thin one. I start all the time from dark places and take a pencil ash, well, either ash or to ash. Look at your discretion, and I sharpen it well and shade everything with a pencil as much as possible everywhere. Then, at some certain point, Ash's pencil can no longer cope. That is, for example, I need to make it darker somewhere, but he does not make it darker. Well, because it's clear, it's a solid pencil, and only in this case, I take a pencil Ash B and start to stroke the pencil Ash B further. I darken where I need to darken. And well, actually, this time I shaded most of them with Ash pencil. But again, I want to say, this is an artist's vista. Maybe in Kahiner, I would have had a different pencil. You know, you don't really focus on it, just look at your feelings. There is no strict rule that we must stroke this with such a pencil. We must stroke this with such a pencil. And in general, it depends very much in principle on the person, on, I don't know, the muscles of your hand, how you press. Because I noticed that one student can draw as much as he would have a straight black line, and the other will take the same pencil, and he will press it lightly. Well, that is, here you need to look at your feelings. But in general, the principle is this: it's better to always take a harder pencil and stroke it until you feel that it will not cope. And then, gradually, take a soft pencil. It is better to shade with a hard pencil several times than with a soft one. So you take it, you start to stroke, and it's like, well, dirt appears from this maybe. Basically, I say, I was hatching Ash with a pencil, and then I took Ash B, and that's just a little bit, just a little bit. I have 2B pencils. Here you can see now, I'm hatching straight dark shadows under the drapery. Under the drapery, well, here is a fold on the right that is quite saturated. We also need to shade it. Notice how I've nullified the background. That is, if I had to draw one-on-one what is in the picture and shade the background. I mean the drapery on which the main drapery is attached. Well, that is, it is absolutely not necessary to do this. I just shaded around the main drapery and negated this tone. That is, I stroke the edge of the drapery with folds tightly, and as I rise up, yes, or to the right or to the left of the drapery, then I take it away so that it merges with the white paper. I don't focus much on this. It's a very useful skill to negate the tone. He is often needed. Well, now I take a pencil 2B and start drawing the darkest places right in the dark. I have a sheet at hand so as not to dirty the work. Well, this is the kind of drapery I got. Be sure to watch the second part, as I will draw the drapery. She'll be out in a few lessons too. We will draw all the same, and there we will fully reveal the topic of how to stroke draperies. There will be complex, large, beautiful folds. Friends, please give me feedback about this tutorial. It will be very interesting for me to understand how much you have understood. Have you found something interesting for yourself from this lesson? I really need feedback to understand how to build further lessons. I'm not going to say anything so specific. There will be lessons in addition to the lessons on the folds, in addition to the lesson that I promised now. Part 2 of the folds according to the drawing or not. I decided some time ago that the drawing was not interesting to anyone, but now I drew again. I was inspired, and in fact I really love drawing. If you have any suggestions about the drawing, then please write. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It will be very nice for me too. This is the kind of drapery I got. All the best, and see you again.